Okay, guys, now that we've all had a bit of an introduction, it's really nice at the start of these calls to get to know a little bit about everyone who has joined the call. I'll give you a little bit of context, and this is just kicking off the brief. So obviously, coronavirus is the reality that we're living in at the moment, and it's been highlighting the fragility of all our global systems, and especially food. As this pandemic is spreading, there's a real possibility that the health crisis will turn into a food crisis. We can all see this as the weeks go on. There are mountains of food going to waste because of unsustainable supply chains. We are clearing land and destroying biodiversity for monocrops, and our environment is being pushed to the brink. So, you know, one of the most fundamental parts of our entire food system is soil. And 1/3 of the world's topsoil is already acutely degraded. And according to the UN, a complete and total degradation of our soil will occur in the next couple of decades if it's left unchanged. This just to visualize what we're going to be chatting to you about today, which is where Regenerate Now comes in, and the team that has just introduced themselves from For the Love of Bees / Urban Farmers Alliance / Regenerate Now. So at this point, I would like to hand over to Sarah, who's the lead vision holder of For the Love of Bees, Urban Farmers Alliance, and the umbrella initiative, which is called Regenerate Now, for her to talk through what their projects are, and we'll take it from there. You ready, Sarah?
I am. So it's really exciting for me to have an opportunity to connect with you guys on the other side of the world, in fact all around the world, including Singapore, and because the vision that we've had here in New Zealand is sort of been a pilot in many ways for looking at how do you act incredibly hyper-locally to create the biggest reach that you possibly can, and what are the models that you can develop where you can share them in a common platform in a way that people feel the joy of participation, but are actually generating real measurable results in their communities. So we started doing that 3 years ago. I'm an artist, and actually this started as an artwork, and I think one of the powers of the project is that it stems from an artwork perspective, which is let's imagine together. We have very specific language that we use. We don't talk things. We invite people to co-create solutions. And the original offer was imagining a city safe for bees in Auckland. So that really wasn't about necessarily beekeeping, but enabling people to expand their thinking beyond here's a bee and what's the ecosystem that they are actually traveling through, and is that ecosystem safe for a bee? And you can actually tell the results of that through the health of a beehive, which you can measure in a real way. So essentially that very quickly took us to flowers that are safe for bees, which was the intention. And the reason for that is that in the pollen, you are basically getting a measure of the horticultural practice in that local ecosystem and within 3 kilometre radius. So essentially we very quickly started talking to people about pesticides, fungicide, herbicide use, and also tilling. We do this through playful, we call them learning adventures. We have strategies where we have what we call centres of regenerative learning dotted around Auckland City. But everything is done as a model so that someone can take that centre of regenerative learning model and actually place it into their own backyard, their own community. We work with lots of different communities. Here you're seeing probably the community that we were most surprised that we ended up working with, but was extremely rewarding, which is of our First Nations people of New Zealand, Māori. These are urban Māori who have experienced homelessness, and we've worked with them very closely over the last 3 years, and food security is a massive issue for them, and also land loss. So we very quickly came to a project called OMG, which is 500 square metres in literally the CBD in Auckland. And on that site, we started demonstrating on our what we call our open classroom regenerative agricultural practices. In order to do that, we needed to train a community of farmers who understood what regenerative agriculture was and how to do that. And we opened that classroom up to anyone in Auckland who wanted to learn. Very quickly, we started to connect with communities around New Zealand who were interested in urban farming, but didn't necessarily understand the climate change mitigation opportunities of that farming. So we created a structure to enable us to put, in terms of our urban food production, over and above that was the climate change mitigation opportunities. Now, obviously, in the COVID moment, that has very quickly intensified different parts of the conversation to really highlighting food security as a massive issue locally and globally, local employment, but what we don't want people to be doing is going out and growing and actually exacerbating climate change negative outcomes. So hence we have harnessed our Urban Farmers Alliance and our For the Love of Bees project into our new offer, which is Regenerate Now, everyone, everywhere, all at once. And essentially it's a digital learning platform where we upskill farmers or people who are interested in farming into what are the actual practices that enable you to ensure that your farming is mitigating climate change while at the same time being extremely profitable so that you can actually create a neighbourhood economy. So we're really interested in this sort of neighbourhood resilience. I think we'll let Levi now. Is that going to play for us, do you think? Have I gone static, have I?
You seem to have
No, you haven't.
a technical problem.
Oh, that's so. Well, I'll just keep talking. Essentially what this particular video is about is a young 26-year-old who 2 years ago had grown a few vegetables for himself. He's actually an artist, stepped into the role of being our first climate change mitigation urban farmer in New Zealand, in actual fact. He has now, we surrounded him with a mentoring program, as I said, that we invited anyone to join in. And now he, 18 months later, on 500 square meters is actually producing, I think it's close to 38 CSA boxes. And what a CSA box is, a community supported agricultural project, which essentially means a box of food to feed 4 people in a family. Now, what we're looking at is quite expensive production on really small sites. So we say 500 square meters can actually produce 50 boxes. So that's feeding 200 people. If you extrapolate that out to, say, a football field, which is 10,000 square meters, we're looking at production of 800 boxes feeding 1,600 people. But the processes that we use are very specific. There's no tilling, so there's absolutely no rupturing of the soil systems. There's multiple species in close proximity to each other, so that is not monocultural cropping. There are a lot, in fact, the next slide probably is a really good one to go to because you can actually see it. And there is everything that is done in this ecosystem is done to restore the ecosystem, to sequester carbon, restore biodiversity habitat, to replenish the aquifers, to mitigate stormwater, to filter the air, to lower the temperature, to take local organic waste, food scraps and cardboard and turn it into fertility on site, to create local jobs, social cohesion and optimism. This was our first mapping of the values that we wanted to create together before we actually got access to the site, and I'd say that those are still very, very pertinent. And the thing that I think that, but we have captured our values and extended them into really 11 climate change ready values. But how do you get farmers on the ground to understand that and to be able to implement it? So our educational platform that we have already started piloting and testing is around giving people daily access to daily mentoring of a really high caliber, of creating a cohesive set of learning tools that mean that everyone is learning the same language so that they understand each other. And actually then practicing it in real time. And what you can see here is, this is a derelict site right in the centre of the city. And within 6 months, we're actually selling food off that. Within 3 months, actually selling food, but within 6 months, generating a business. And now within 18 months, he is now earning enough money selling to his community who walk to him to actually pay above the living wage. We pay $25 an hour, so that's $52,000 a year for that farmer. But a site like that could actually create 2.5 jobs. And really, what is regenerative agriculture? How is that distinct from conventional agriculture? And conventional agriculture and even corporate organic agriculture doesn't necessarily think through process or systems thinking that asks the question at every beat, will this disrupt or improve the ecosystem? Regenerative agriculture through the UFA Regenerate Now principles are very specific. Every action taken is rebuilding the ecosystem, and that can happen extremely fast. This is an entirely no-till garden, nothing has been dug. And essentially, I feel like I can really simplify that for you. And where it really makes a difference to climate changes, we can stop driving cars and we can reduce our carbon outputs, but there is already too much carbon in the atmosphere. And we can plant forests to actually sequester and draw down through photosynthesis carbon. And that's what photosynthesis is. It is a draw down out of the atmosphere into biomass through sap, and then it gets actually, stored in biomass and soil systems. But forests are one strategy, and they're a 20 to 30 year strategy. Regenerative agriculture has very quick carbon cycles. So we're talking about drawdown happening at a much faster rate. And it actually has the capacity, done at scale and done well, to be one of the fastest ways to actually draw down carbon out of the atmosphere. But the other benefit is that, as Tamsin said, is that we are in a crisis around soil systems that we can grow food in, that actually can even support the growing of forests. So we really have to suddenly make this one of our priorities, learning how to rebuild soil systems. The good news is it's actually extremely easy. It's just a very, what we're finding is that people understand the processes very, very quickly. And we are enabling ordinary people to be able to become action takers in a very short space of time, while beautifying their local ecosystems, connecting to their communities, and generating an avalanche of optimism.
Awesome. So now, Tasman, do you want to maybe outline the ask?
Yeah, so my laptop very conveniently crashed, so I'm not sure. Did you guys have an opportunity to play the video that we had put into the deck?
No.
Would you like to go back and for us to play it, Sarah? I think we have some time.
I think it would be great to get a sense of the community, yeah.
All right.
Cool. So if you can just turn the volume. Oh, okay. Let me share my screen because it needs to be on PowerPoint.
Nice. Now we can see all the faces in the room again.
You need to enable screen sharing for me again, Luz.
Done.
Cool.
My name's Levi. I'm the head farmer here, OMG, Organic Market Garden, a collaboration of For the Love of Bees. We're a community farm, and what we do here is we work with volunteers to grow nutrient-dense food at great scale and diversity to get out there to feed the community. We discovered that both ourselves and the community that we grow for, we love vegetable boxes. Because of this, we've decided to switch most of our production into a model of community-supported agriculture.
So nice.
We are giving you the opportunity to commit to a seasonal subscription, which guarantees you a weekly box, but also guarantees us consistent income. These subscriptions run seasonally for 3 months, with the first one beginning in mid-January. Get in touch now if this is something that you want to see grow. We have a vision of regenerative food production and education, creating climate change ready infrastructure in every suburb across Auckland City. We believe this model will enable communities to support this dream becoming a reality.
Thank you, Levi. Thanks for all the hard money, bro. It's so cool when someone gets a box for the first time. They're just like in awe. Because it costs like the same as what you'd buy in the supermarket as well. And it's been picked like, 15 minutes ago or half an hour ago. Hardly anyone gets to eat food like that.
Okay.
My name's Lee.
Cool. I'll just head to the...
So I think one of the things that we started saying a year ago is that we wanted to have an urban farm every 1 kilometre. And the other thing that I think is really important to mention is that we have local composting hubs. And so we're looking at trying to capture the waste streams that occur in a local community, keep them in that local community, and have them support the fertilisation and the soil building and the food production in that local community. And we now have a council here in Auckland who have had that written into their city centre master plan. So I guess one of the things that we're witnessing is that people are ready for this idea. They just need to have it packaged so that they understand it. They need access to it. And that's been one of our other major commitments, is that a lot of people are packaging regenerative learning and selling it online as a business. And what we understand is that the people who are going to make the difference don't necessarily have access to that kind of income to pay for that. And we're really committed to creating a platform that is free, accessible to everyone, and actually having delivery opportunities within that platform where you're a 4-year-old and you can understand it, and you're a 70-year-old CEO and you can understand it. This is a story that everyone needs to be able to actually connect their hearts to and find a way to actually become a protagonist in. It's a real opportunity to stop observing and participate through the food that you eat. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks so much, Sarah. Great. So now that you guys know a bit about the Regenerate Now story and all the initiatives that make up the umbrella initiative, we can get to how you guys can help, how creatives can get involved. So ultimately, we want to bring awareness and resources to as many people as possible. So the brief is wide. We want to reach everyone, everyone who wants to help form a new society and economy. Students who are wanting to make a difference. There's ways that these kind of outcomes can be worked into their studies. Home gardeners, anyone who buys food and grows their own herbs or veggies in their garden. Urban farmers, obviously who feed the neighborhoods, and also commercial farmers, people who feed the nations, commercial retailers and policymakers. We really do want to reach as many people as possible. We are really excited to hear your ideas, and obviously this will be followed by a Q&A and kind of a little bit of a brainstorming sessions. But what some of the thoughts that we put together was, could creatives help us consolidate the offers across all the platforms, assistance restructuring the 3 projects, which are doing such great work, and putting them cohesively onto one site. Different sets of communication templates, so it's easy for people to understand and get involved and make use of resources. Are there opportunities for international collaborations? Is this in a form of different kind of video channels, or even just videos that we could create, or templates for these videos we could create? Putting together a platform where you can really share the magic of how Regenerate Now can engage people. Animations, like this is something that could be a really interesting way of putting across information about growing your own food. Animations, and Sarah can tell you a little bit more about some of the potential we have for animations. And yeah, like streamlining delivery methods for Regenerate Now, the online programs like masterclasses, webinars, farmer in the field mentoring videos, which now at the moment are going through Instagram stories, and I think just starting on YouTube. So those are some of the thoughts that we've thrown around. Yeah, this is pretty much where we throw it over to you guys, the creatives, the storytellers and myth builders of the society. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Brilliant. And this is also the time, like with any kind of commercial brief, just to be able to interrogate it. So all like stupid questions are welcome, smart ones too. No, so just to like really like, hone in on like, do you understand the brief? Do you agree with the target audience? And from there we can take it back in terms of creative executions, wild ideas. So we'll hand it over.
So do I understand correctly that the main objective is sharing knowledge, that when that knowledge is shared through videos or to fun ways that we're gonna make up, it will spread? That is the main objective?
Yes. However, we also partner that with real sites that are really being transformed in real time. So it's not just a learning platform where it's an abstraction, or it's a farm that happened a year ago, or it's one farm. Currently on the Regenerate Now through the UFO, we have 38 projects live in New Zealand. We have over 60 people that we are already mentoring on a daily basis around composting. So I think the power of it, we did another farmer in the field today, and just to give you an idea of what the farmer in the field is that we have probably about 12 farms that are working towards like production at the moment. So we have the farmers actually in their real field, and we have 3 mentors mentoring through problem solving that they're having this specific time. So real farmers working through real solutions that other farmers have. So there's this kind of, people mentioned empathy before. It's a really fantastic way of it feeling real, urgent, and generating empathy. So it's, yes, it is an educational platform, but it also is based on what we call centers of regenerative learning, real sites being transformed in real time. And I think one of the dreams is being able to find a way to make these multiple ecosystem transformations visible and being able to be collated so that the story of a movement is actually able to be followed, understood, and potentially seen.
Mark,
one more other.
I know that you're always I was going to use the word genius. I know you're always a genius at simplifying things, and I wanted to maybe ask you if you could just maybe re-articulate the brief back as you saw it in simple language, because I know that that would help me also.
Well, for one, I actually think this is one of the most brilliant briefs we crashed into. But I've been reading and following quite a lot on regenerative agriculture and the initiatives around it. You know, from people like Daniel Christian Weil and Wesley Rowe, and around the world, a lot of stuff is happening. But I've never seen something which is so down to earth, so practical, so accessible, and therefore so productive, I think. Literally, I do feel this network of smaller bioregions and people doing this could actually transform the way we live, the way we build local economies, the way we do everything. And Sarah and team, you did a brilliant job, I think, in making this like compact, practical, and inspirational as well. One of your remarks caught me when you said, we want, like, on every mile, we would love to establish this. And then I thought, this could be the alternative for 5G, which is being built currently around the world. And that could be a network of death, and this could be the network of life, even. I really think it's brilliant, really do.
Thanks.
So thanks.
So we got some news about how the, I think is it the mayor who's the key person in Amsterdam, who's now working with Kate Raworth, the economist, to set up a donut economy going forward in Amsterdam, recovering from COVID-19. And of course, over there, thinking about thriving, the production of food and how it is produced in that urban context is going to be very big. So I would imagine there'd be quite a lot of support and new developments in this space that you might be already connecting with.
Andrea, you might be able to talk a bit about that. And we also have a question in the chat. There are some successful urban farms in Amsterdam. Are you involved in their outreach or in any capacity? So I think the answer is no, not yet, in terms of the love of bees. But Andrea, I know that as a circular economist evangelist.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. Absolutely. As soon as I hear donut economics, and especially very closely watching what's happening in the Amsterdam, and indeed the city of Amsterdam decided that that's the way going forward. It's pretty much like a regenerative future for city of Amsterdam, circular economy. They already have strategy in place. Actually, they have a meeting with them at the beginning of May to really find out more what's happening. But I was a part of the very first initial workshop that Kate Raworth was actually doing here in Amsterdam. And regenerative farming was such a big topic that was being discussed there. So the conclusion, unfortunately, also was, yeah, we're not doing enough here in Amsterdam. So that's definitely such a huge opportunity for the city. And at the same time, the whole city is very keen to keep the parks. As Sven Katte already mentioned, there are indeed some urban farms where people can just go and pick up their own food or vegetables and fruits especially. So that could be really very interesting going forward. For practical
big
reasons,
distinction from
please
is the model that that we are designing, because it has a front end education, it has a grounded application, and then it has a business support that we're currently developing. Which, because one of the big things is people who start don't necessarily always come from a horticultural background. In fact, they often don't, because they don't have any preconceived ideas. So it's about actually how do these sites produce as much food for as many people as possible, as opposed to traditionally a lot of these sites were allotments where people would go and had a wonderful experience and they would grow food for themselves, but it didn't necessarily produce the most amount of food, the most amount of nutrition for the most amount of people. And one of the things that we're looking on in our sites is that is, like, for example, we have a farm in Wellington where we did our Farmer in the Field today. They have software engineers, they have scientists, they have lecturers who do half of their week in an office and half of their week as a composter or half of their week as a farmer. And so one of the great outcomes is also that you're creating a different way of living and a different way of being employed in your hyperlocal economy, where you can actually have much more diversity. So these plots of lands, while in the commons, have a different system to the plot. And I think, yeah, sorry, that's enough speaking from me.
Can I ask a couple of clarifying questions just about the people you're trying to reach? First of all, was basically, are you looking to reach mainly people in New Zealand or internationally all over the world? Oh, go ahead.
So I spent a month in Japan last year. And one of the things that really happened for me when I was there was it really consolidated for me that there are young people, and not just young people, but let me just speak at the moment to young people. Young people all around the world want to make a difference. They're trying to find their way to farming, but they don't necessarily know how to do that. They're looking on the internet, and they're actually often replicating bad practice. Funnily enough, today our big conversation on the farm that we had was too much compost. Actually, you have too much organic matter and suddenly there's no nutrient cycling. So what we're trying to do is to actually create a model and a template that anyone in the world could actually participate in.
Okay.
I mean, like today, we're having a conversation in multiple places. So the digital platform is actually being designed to light a fire internationally.
Okay.
But
so
we grounded it in New Zealand. So
okay, cool. So that leads, I guess, into my other question, which is, I mean, I know that you have a lot of different groups of people that you want to reach in different ways, but in general, it seems like you're saying what you want people to do is to recognize that they can both get involved in the regenerative I can't say that word, in the gardens that are already present in New Zealand, but also start their own anywhere in the world. And maybe to recognize farming as cool and easy and a way of being in community. Is that a good summary?
A way to mitigate climate change, a way to start making a difference in terms of drawdown. So
yeah,
there's
to
reduction
be a
of carbon
in the climate change crisis. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Can I ask a question, Sarah? If you would boil it down to, let's say, 3 or 4 or 5 kits that you would need, like, you know, educational introductory kits for people to start doing this within their community, what would the kits be like?
Step in and help me. What we've done at the moment, so the COVID's been really interesting because we were trying to do this on the ground, and literally over the last 3 weeks we've had a complete rethink and seen what we can fire up without being on the ground. So what we have is, and this is not necessarily the kit, but these are the strategies that we have at the moment, which is we have a WhatsApp channel where basically that is, you have a disease on your leaf, you take a photograph, you go, what is this disease? You get an answer within 10 minutes. You have a soil test, you don't quite understand it, you ask a question, you get an answer. So that's a daily mentoring. Then we've created Regenerate Now, our Instagram, which is essentially an Instagram takeover with our farmers. So every week you meet a new farm, you're in a new farmer, you're learning their innovations, you're understanding their ecosystem. At the end of that week, we do a farmer in the field with them, where you can actually watch them learning in real time. You know their farm, you understand them. Now you're learning what it is that they can be actually getting to get more productive. Oh, damn, am I unstable?
I think that there's a huge opportunity here, the way that I see it, in two things. One of them is like touching on employment opportunities. So reimagining the economy and like hitting people where it hurts, but also a lot of people at home and grow your own food. There's probably some food that you can grow within your home, like even if you don't have a garden, and certainly if you do have a balcony or a garden. But I almost feel like, maybe this is just me, that this warrants actually like a further brainstorm on defining the brief. So like, what is the ask of videographers? What is the ask of designers? And I think like, are there any strategists here that could maybe take it to the next level in terms of the ask? Is that a silly idea?
Just to also give you just one specific, like we have a beautiful story about how photosynthesis works and how plants work with microbes and exudates. That's the sort of thing that would be beautifully turned into an animation, for example, that would enable very easy learning. That's a different type of tool.
And are you looking for just like more animations about this, or is it branded Regenerate now? So like, what's the strategic comms goal, let's say?
Charlotte.
I think we need more tools to be able to talk to the various kind of groups that we're trying to talk to, because what we have is a really strong working group and advocacy group within New Zealand. I think what we need is more capacity to be able to talk to people who are outside that, and people in a creative way. And we're all doing this, you know, on like the smell of an oily rag, if that is a phrase that exists elsewhere other than New Zealand. And so I think that's kind of that's probably our comms goal is we need tools to be able to communicate this in a more universal way, in a way that's outside of our bubble as well. And knowing that the energy really communicates or translates outside of us is our strength, but it's how do we harness it and how do we maximize it?
Yeah, and in combining what Priyanka just wrote in the comment section, we had discussed doing a couple of different short series on the YouTube channel, which has just been launched. So it could be like a short video series that is talking about what regenerative agriculture really is, and then another series teaching people how to bring that into their homes or how to bring that into a community farm. So it could be those could be the communication tools. It could start with some short video series.
I think something else too.
As a strategist, how I would see it, what the actual ask is an online campaign, which is in symbiosis with two different target groups. So it's one campaign with one message, regenerative now. And there's a line in there, but for every group, you specify, you translate it a little bit different. So I would say a great ask, or as a strategy, I would say this is an online campaign with different assets that you can build in and plan throughout the year, throughout the half year, to see how you want to grow that movement step by step.
But what I'm also hearing is that the regenerative agriculture movement doesn't have any cool videos to mainstream this message for everyone in this space.
No, exactly. To make it easy to understand, we don't yet have even that being super accessible to people who've not heard of it.
Tim, as a regenerative agriculture specialist, can you vouch for the lack of cool videos and creative assets?
I definitely could. Yeah, it would be useful to have those bits of information. I saw one this morning, actually, and I've been trying to track it down, and it's really hard to find. So that kind of goes to show what is available or what isn't available. So making it, highlighted it in the chat as well, that it boils down, it's about making it easy for people to understand as well, and boiling it down to a set of key principles. You can have an urban farm, and you can have an urban farm. And one is regenerative and climate friendly and feeds the soil. and the other, you know, is tilling, is CO2 expensive, could be an urban farm, a vertical farm, something like that. So how can you make people understand the difference between two urban farms really easily from a perspective of someone who doesn't really know that much about farming?
I think that's a really good point, and also that the content that, like, we've already started to make this content. The Urban Farmers Alliance is making this content now, and that's kind of the key thing that they're trying to hone in on, is how do they do it in a really accessible way, which is, you know, starting with Instagram Live, with putting the videos on YouTube and everything. It's how do we get those videos out, I guess, which is every marketing issue ever, right? But
an amazing initiative, by the way. I love it. I absolutely love it.
And I think really one thing we shouldn't forget, and that's in this briefing session actually, is that to me the eye-opening thing was that it can be as simple as you just put it, in the way of, you know, right, it's a big thing. People don't even know how to farm, let alone know how to farm regeneratively. And what you did, and what is so inspiring, is that you actually show in a video how this could be done in a practical way, and how it could lead within a year to results in building local economies, in feeding your community, in sequestering carbon emissions, etc., etc., etc. But it's so, I think the inspirational and energetic part of it, and the accessible part of it, is its main strength as well. This is normal people doing fantastic stuff to turn around their local economy and ecology.
I just wanted to mention in as a researcher, we have a big collaboration on with researchers at Wageningen, at your university, Wageningen, and there are quite a few in that group who work on urban farmers and urban farming and regenerative farming and diverse economies, diverse livelihoods through farming. And they've been doing a lot of work over several years now, and that they're a very important resource group to be able to draw on in terms of what's happening in Netherlands, but also what's happening in other parts of the world, because they've got projects underway that connects urban farming in a lot of different places.
Mm-hmm. Just thinking out loud here as well, I noticed that those last years, what started to become very popular are kind of like a rooftop gardens. And also in my head, it goes almost like a perfect connection between generations. So sort of like filling generations gap. I just remember when I was little, my grandparents, for them, that used to be just something very normal. And for the generation of people, let's say like, 70 plus especially, everyone knew how to garden, how to foster a garden, how to grow vegetables. And it seems that the younger generation completely forgot about this skill. And this could be also a nice link to connect kind of like a generations, the ones that have the knowledge and the ones that are curious to explore this knowledge.
I'm very conscious that we've reached 4 o'clock and some people might need to jump off the call now, but we've had Lucy?
Oh no, I was just going to make a joke, like, oh my God, have we reached 4 o'clock? Because it's 10 a.m. here. But
yeah.
I realized it wasn't the time.
We've had quite a few really interesting comments and chats. Casper and Priyanka kind of pushing what we discussed earlier, like starting really simple, showing people who are at home right now what they can do in their homes, even if that is just composting. So in terms of next steps, after this call, we'll consolidate everyone's email address. Please, before you jump off the call, put your email address into the comments, and we will share the content that we chatted through. We'll share any additional information from Regenerate Now, and we'll use that thread to kind of chat and form a working group. Any other last questions before we go? Yes, Sarah.
I just wanted to give you one really inspiring fact. On that little farm I showed you, and the first soil test showed that in the first 6 months of growing, we added organic matter, so sequestered over 10 tons of carbon, and we only brought one on. So that's actually that's the power of photosynthesis for you. And one more thing, just to build on what Sita said, the academic community have a massive amount to offer in terms of the data collection. So there's stage 1, which is activating everyone, and stage 2, measuring it so you can inspire people by actual measurable results. So I just put that out there to be in the long term.
There are some amazing ideas just coming through in the chat, so I'm just capturing them all. But I think what would make some sort of working group, I think the mix of people like Andrea and Tim, like regenerative circular specialists with all the creatives that we have, but I think like boiling it down into something tangible from this that everybody can work on and contribute to would be great. So if you want to be a part of that, drop your email in. We don't have everyone's email if you just logged in, so you do have to actively kind of opt in now. And yeah, that's how we'll take it forward.
Yeah, so look out for the email that'll come after this meeting.
Does anybody have any final questions or comments now that before you go, you're welcome to leave, of course, too.
Yeah, I actually do have one quick question. And for me, I'm thinking about, it's an amazing topic, but it's really big and there's a lot of facets. And to me, what you kept saying no-till, and no-till was mentioned in the videos, and that idea is like, oh, that's a really simple difference between what a regenerative garden is and what an industrial or commercial garden is. So this idea of like no-till versus landfill, or how do we start, like when you say no-till to someone, they think like a small pot all the way to like, you know, a nice little farm. But is there a way to kind of simplify regenerative versus industrial into one angle, maybe like that? Because it's so many things, and I wonder if there's a way to just like hook people with one small facet of it. So I guess the question is that a good inclusion of it, or is there like a different angle that you maybe push instead?
I would caution I would the no-till, because no-till is also used in a lot of big industrial farming, because it's accompanied the use of glyphosate to remove residues. So on the one hand, they're doing something good. There's also a simultaneous counterproductive use of very nasty chemicals. So the no-till can mean multiple things across the farming domain.
Okay, that's good to know.
But it does have a ring to it for sure.
But also it is also critical practice. And I think this is the nature of the space, is that it's like the word love gets co-opted. Regenerative's been co-opted, organics been co-opted. We actually called it climate change mitigation farming at one point, because that's our priority. Our priority, along with food security and employment, is actually to ensure that the production of food restores the ecosystem. Nature, plant. I will send you a little story that I wrote around photosynthesis and how plants, and it's really the story that you saw, Tamsin, and I think that would be a really nice first thing to send you out to have a look at. And Sita, we'll send it to you too, because you make some really, you've been in the space for a very long time, so it's really great, your comments.
So what you started, Sarah, for the love of bees has such a lovely ring to it, and it led in so many different places. Maybe what you're looking for, Amy, is something
Has it frozen?
a good life in it.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. I think I'm just trying to find a focus point for sort of where to help people start. And I think the way I'm understanding it is, what we need to do is come up with a really simple way of saying, grow local, save the climate, get started with us. And if we can have some kind of a phrase like for the love of soil or local soil or whatever, like that brings all these ideas together, that's sort of the comms aspect of it. But then there's the separate, we need animation pieces and we need ideas for how to distribute them. But there's a comms challenge that sits in front of all that we need to figure out first. That's sort of the way I'm understanding it. But
for the Love of Bees team, if you had like an ask, like an immediate, like we're missing an Instagram strategist, or we're missing, like, are there any like easy wins for people on the call that would just like to dive in and maybe help you guys?
Catherine?
Yeah, I guess if there's anyone that would like to do some design work with simple slogans for our Instagram account, or redo the design on the start of our films for the Fields for the Future, that might be great.
I would also say that at the moment none of us are digital experts, none of us are YouTube or Instagram experts. We're literally launching at the moment an Instagram, a Zoom webinar, and then a masterclass webinar. It would be fantastic to be able to package those things so that they exist as a package, because they're actually a learning pathway.
One last question, and then I have to jump off. But have you guys ever thought about doing a mentorship program between more established farms and people who want to get started? Because I think the idea is super interesting, but oftentimes, how do I start is actually the biggest barrier. And if you could think about like a sister cities concept where farms are paired, like a new one and an old one, to sort of help them get moving, is that something you guys could do?
We kind of have that already. With like say Sophie.
Yeah, well, I just can I answer that, Catherine? I think ideally that's what we're working towards, but I would say there are very few farms at the moment that are ready to do that without So our first objective is to get a number of farms to that level, and then yes. The system is you parent farms regionally, so you ideally are looking for exemplar farms in different regions. You are nurturing them, and then they nurture others. And then yes, absolutely, we could then pull that into a platform. At the moment, what we have is the Farmer in the Field and the Regenerate Now, which is essentially people as they learn are sharing their learning, but they are not experts yet. So that's where they get mentored at the end of the week by the experts. And then we move into a masterclass. So we're about to do our first masterclass next Tuesday. It's either next Tuesday or the Tuesday after. And that's going to be a very deep dive. It's 30 minutes of intensive learning and then 30 minutes of questions at the end, where you're able to actually take something and then go, well, what does that mean to me? Then the following week, you can go back into a farm and observe another farm learning. You can observe, then go to their mentoring session online. And then 2 weeks later, there's another masterclass. So that's our strategy at the moment. Ultimately, we will have very quickly within it, Levi, who's been farming for a year, is almost ready to mentor another farm. Very, very close. So close. He's probably another 6 months of farming before he can do that.
Okay, that's super helpful. Thank you.
So I guess like an introduction video on how those three come together and who we are would be really useful to share across platforms as well.
And the other thing that we are really create a series of very short videos on what does no-till mean in the system. How do I plant in this system? How do I fertilize in this system? So there's some very practical, that's your toolkit stuff. That requires a little bit of scripting from our end to do that, to get that up.
from the names that are in the call, I'm just like building like a rough kind of what could be like a team, let's say. Like I love the idea of having like regenerative experts like Andrea and Tim, with like social media experts like Ploy and Carly. But yeah, it's just an idea. But Miles, I think I saw you on the cusp of raising your voice.
No, I just like the prospect of maybe actually doing some farming myself. But I liked what you're saying is like you had professional people that were kind of using it to balance their lifestyle themselves as well. If they're doing a few days in an office and then getting involved, getting their hands dirty on a couple of days a week. That idea really appeals to me. I think they could. That's definitely one angle you can sell it to people with.
Oh, and there's one more thing we need to do. We need to get councils everywhere to unlock land to do this on. So that's another big project, is how, so one of the things that we're seeing that you guys will help us do is to put together a really compelling offer. When they see it visually, it makes sense to them, it's impressive, it looks really professional. That's going to help unlock land. It's going to help unlock funding, both for the platform, but also for them for the projects in each of their regional locations. So that's it. Those are the outcomes that we're hoping that this will actually produce.
Brilliant. All right, well, we might wrap it up then. But thanks everybody. Thanks Tasman for like vetting this brief. If anyone's like curious about how Creators for Climate works, we have 8 volunteer briefing strategists that basically receive requests and both figure out if it's like something we really want to ask the creative community to participate in, but also to turn it into something actionable. So yeah.
Great. So we'll follow up with our email to everyone on the call. Yeah. Thanks for joining, guys.
Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day wherever you are. Bye.
Bye.